Oh boy. I guess it was only a matter of time for a channel mostly devoted to superhero games to cover this not exactly superheroic game. Developed by Titus Interactive and published by Nintendo, Superman the New Adventures, most commonly known as Superman 64, is notoriously known for not just being one of the worst superhero games of all time, but one of the worst video games of all time, period. Is it really that bad? However, yes it is. It is unfathomably bad. As someone who has never played this game before prior to this review, I can tell you that from its reputation alone, I kind of had an idea of what I was stepping into, but knowing what I was getting into and experiencing it for myself are two completely different things. To preface this, I grew up without a Nintendo 64, which was something that I would occasionally regret, as a choice I had made growing up was the PlayStation, and we really couldn't afford another console. It wasn't up until very recently, about 3 or 4 years ago, where I acquired the console in hopes of catching up on lost time with games I didn't get to enjoy in my youth. My cousins, however, did have the N64, and on that they had the best wrestling games by way of WrestleMania 2000 and WWF No Mercy. But the real kicker, and the game that we spent heaps of time on, was Rare's 007 GoldenEye. All of these games, despite me having a blast on the PlayStation, were teetering me on the edge of hopping back on the Nintendo train. But one game I was seeing countless advertisements for in gaming magazines my uncle would give me was for the Man of Steel. Superman was getting his own game on the N64 of all platforms, based off of the animated series, and I was upset. I love the Big Blue Boy Scout. I, like many kids, would put on a red towel over my neck and would jump off my bed hoping to fly. Having a game that would allow you to do this in a city with Superman was just too good of an opportunity for me to pass up. But pass it up I did. I had a PlayStation, and so I had to hold that L. Or at least, what was at the time a perceived L. Could you imagine me swapping the PlayStation for an N64 for Superman? Well, that's what almost happened. Having finally played this game, it is without a shadow of a doubt one of the worst experiences I have ever had with a video game in my lifetime, rivaled right up there with Spider-Man and the X-Men in Arcade's Revenge. Superman 64 is a miserable time. While I can think of a few of the reasons why they made the choices they did considering the circumstances surrounding the game, of which we'll talk about later, it still doesn't excuse the sheer horror of everything else around it. You start off with this game's attempt at a story. Lex Luthor has kidnapped Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Professor Hamilton, and shoved them into a virtual world. Or, more realistically, these cardboard cutouts of these alleged characters just stand idly by as they get warped into this virtual world without any real attempt of resisting. We're off to a good start. You play as Superman, of course, who dives into this world to save all three by having to adhere to Luthor's rules. Yeah, solve my maze, Superman, as you fly through sequenced rings in order to progress to the next objective. While this initial ring flight isn't a bad idea in concept, since anyone who has ever wished to be the Man of Steel often wants to experience flight, these controls, my god, Superman in this game has absolutely, positively, zero precision in flight. To describe the control in this game would be utterly impossible, but to say that the game feels like it's fighting against you would be an understatement. I've never really been a fan of the Nintendo 64's joystick, to be completely honest. To me, it ergonomically just feels wrong. But even so, I'd much rather have Superman take flight with this over the D-pad, because if properly developed, you could potentially have an increased range of motion and overall control with it. The problem is, though, is that it's not. One look at how Superman moves in flight in this game tells you all that you need to know visually. With how often he constantly spazzes out to the sides and spikes himself in any given direction for just slightly, and I do mean slightly, tilting the joystick will have you vice gripping your controller out of sheer frustration. Yet it wouldn't be so bad if the game did anything else but truncate the flying to these incredibly stupid rings. You're developing a game for Superman. If you know that your control for his flight is a dumpster fire, maybe don't develop and design precision-based flight missions for it. Look at him. Look! Flying is supposed to be majestic with Superman. Instead, he looks like he's desperately out of his league trying to conduct desperately out of his league trying to conduct a symphony. But the kicker is, even if you can manage to get somewhat of a hold on the handling, the game has such bad optimization that oftentimes it matters not how precise you are. The draw distance is so bad that streaming happens right before your very eyes as opposed to gradually coming in from a decent distance, like any other game like this. Kryptonite fog is what the developers attempted to call it. What? Right. This causes massive frame rate drops, which on top of the shoddy character handling, makes it 10 times worse. What's worse than bad control, you might ask? Bad control with a slight delay. And it's not just in the air either. Superman on the ground also moves like a rusted tank. So if you can stomach getting through the ring sections and the horribly paced side objectives that come right after, that start instantly, with no time to allow you to even process what's happening or what to do, of which if you fail, will send you right back to the rings again, or even this incredibly tedious tornado section that you have to deal with by using your super breath via a power-up pickup where you have to fly around towards said tornadoes and somehow slow down with enough time and precision, which is not nearly as easy as you think, as there is no brake button for this flying mechanic, to blow all these tornadoes away before they kill generic virtual person number 45, which really, considering that they're not even real, shouldn't matter in the first place.
Bitch, is you blind?
You're met with the most generic enemies in all of existence. And they're the only humanoid ones outside of bosses, and these weird polygonal meshes meant to be robots. They're called the Dark Shadow. Highly original. You might as well call them the bad guys, trademark. This section of the game is meant to showcase Superman's hand-to-hand combat, but even this is horrifically terrible. While Superman has historically never been showcased to be the most technical fighter in the world, often relying on his raw power to win him his fights, he at least has some hand-to-hand prowess. In this game, Superman fights with the grace of a fledgling drunk. He widely swings his arms in an incoherent fashion with an incredibly short range, which in turn makes the hand-to-hand combat feel extremely awkward and clunky. It's also not helped that the sound design is also embarrassingly generic. The animated series of which this is based off had some great sound design. Punches felt impactful because they had a hefty, weighty sound to them. This game's sound design is dreadful. From its elevator music-inspired soundtrack to explosions that sound like they come from the first royalty-free Google search, to punches that sound more like Superman slapping your super ass than the power of a god hitting you in the face, it all enforces this underwhelming feeling you get from all the other things that are wrong with this game. Pushing through all of this gets you to the next portion of this game, and it again highlights more issues with this horrifying nightmare. We've already established how piss poor the controls are for this game, so naturally, the next thing you don't want to do is enclose Superman in a tight-knit interior, which is exactly what this game does. Why? It also adds another time limit, and I just cannot be bothered. I really can't. There is nothing redeeming or fun about any of this, and it's when you're introduced to super speed as well. But how in the hell am I supposed to control this when I have zero room to move in? If you're even lucky enough to get past this section and manage to not clip through the walls with the awful collision issues this game has, then guess what awaits you on the other side?
Then there's no time to waste.
This is when the game has officially jumped the shark for me. It's one thing to have these boring, monotonous ring segments with the worst flight controls possible, but now the rings move, which again exposes just how slippery these controls are by an extreme margin. Well, no more. I cannot stomach this game any longer. And it's a good thing I stopped here too, because if I continued to plow through this steaming heap, I would have been roadblocked by a screen telling me that I needed to play the game on hard mode. Well, how in the love of all that is righteous hell was I supposed to know that? When you start the game, there is no difficulty prompt like any other normal game on the face of the planet. No, instead, you have to go into the options before you start the game to put the game on Superman mode. Why not just have it at the main menu when you select the game to begin anyways? Everything about this game is ass backwards. There is not a single redeeming thing that I can possibly find about this colossal failure, and any suggestion that I could potentially make would not solve the fundamental issues this game has at its core. How is it this bad? Well, thanks to the internet, we finally have an answer. Shoutouts to the numerous amounts of people who did their research on the matter, specifically Matt McMuscles. You see, when Titus bought the rights to use the license from Warner Brothers, it was under a different management team. A team that was subsequently let go nearly almost immediately after the Titus deal was inked. The new Warner Brothers team pretty much despised Titus from the get-go and thought that another developer with more of a notoriety would have paid even more for the Superman license and put out a better product. This caused a lot of conflict between the two sides as Warner Brothers consistently put the screws on Titus intentionally about the most minuscule of things, with Titus in turn having to constantly seek approval to have Superman do anything of their game. It caused major plans to be scrapped, got the PlayStation 1 version of this game scrapped due to the meddling, which caused a delay, which in turn caused the license to run out, which is honestly a shame because from the prototype footage shown off, once again thanks to the internet, it actually looked like it was shaping up to be a halfway decent game. For those of you who can't believe the Warner Brothers story, it's still kind of happening to this day. It wasn't all that long ago where Rocksteady was heavily teasing having their go at Big Blue and Arkham Knight.
Come on, man. $50. Pay up. Come on. It's not like you guessed it was Wayne. You're the one who put money on him being an alien refugee from a dying planet. I could have sworn I heard that before.
And there were even also follow-up reports about them internally working on the pre-production for a Superman game with concept art being leaked onto the internet. This, however, turned into a big nothing burger because Warner Brothers apparently put the kibosh on that, and what we're getting now is a Suicide Squad where we have to kill the Justice League. Well, at least we have Injustice where Superman is... Oh. We're never getting a good Superman game, are we?